Hello and welcome to the British Dapper, and today we're talking about dress codes and the workplace. So recently I posted a video on Wednesday's wear, and in that video I was wearing a Prince of Wales overcoat along with a wool charcoal grey jacket, a waistcoat and a tie, and the question was posed to me, in this day of relaxed men's attire in the workplace, would I wear this instead of traditionally wearing a suit in the workplace, or would I always wear a suit? Well, in truth, I don't wear a suit very often in the workplace, and typically a lot of people don't in this day and age. But it did bring on a series of other sub-questions as well. For example, wearing items where you dress better than your boss or your work colleagues, and how that can cause issues for individuals. And so today's video is looking at dress codes and the workplace. So I think one of the first places to start when we're looking at this as a subject might be looking at it from an employer's point of view who wants to introduce or has introduced a work dress code. So for these examples, I'm talking about here in the UK, but I would suspect that the majority of countries around the world would have something similar to what I'm going to say today, or certainly something that you could all relate to when it comes to dress codes in the workplace. So if we look at the principle of a dress code historically, in Rome, only emperors could wear purple. Crimson, red and other colours were reserved for people of a certain position in society or rank in the military. In Tudor England, King Henry VIII decreed that silk, velvet, certain furs and the wearing of precious stones was reserved for nobility only. This was because clothes were such a status symbol during Tudor times, and with the advent of merchants becoming very, very rich and able to afford the similar things to the nobility, it was considered a way of controlling that so that only the nobility could be dressed in a certain manner. In the modern time, we see dress codes being introduced and used in a way of defining the way people dressed in a particular place. For example, in the 60s, it became fashionable for men to wear brightly coloured shirts, bum freezer jackets, winkle picker shoes or boots, which were not considered to be traditional forms of dress. So the work dress code was a way of restricting this new wave of dressing and keeping things in a more traditional sense. There are no specific laws in the UK that govern dress codes in the workplace, but employers can implement a dress code as long as it follows certain guidelines and must not be discriminant. So here are some things to consider if we're looking at implementing a dress code policy. So the first thing to consider is discrimination. So the dress code should not discriminate between employees based on protective characteristics such as race, sex, disability, or religion. The next thing is equality. Dress codes must apply equally to men and women, even if they have different requirements. Dress codes must be able to accommodate reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities or a particular requirement based on religion, race, etc. Something else to consider is proportionate means. So the dress code must be proportionate to the overall aim of employing the dress code. For example, if you want to portray your business in a certain manner and you dictate that people wear ties as an example, then as long as it's justifiable why you'd be wanting them to wear ties or why you'd want them to wear ties, and it's not an unreasonable request, then it's fair to say it would be appropriate to write it into the dress code. So what are the benefits of having a dress code in the office? Well, there are many legitimate reasons for introducing a dress code in the workplace. And for some types of employment, it might be a requirement. For example, health and safety would require in the dress code that you must wear hair nets, for example, if you're dealing with food, or you might have to wear beard nets, or you may have to wear protective glasses or hearing protection. And that might be written into the dress code, and this is pretty standard stuff. But also, it could be in the office environment where if a dress is worn or a skirt is worn, it's below a certain length to provide that professional look. But equally, offer people a choice between, for example, skirts and trousers, not dictate a particular item without breaching those earlier mentioned requirements. And it might be to convey that corporate image that we're trying to cultivate and demonstrate to other people. So the next question is, can employers introduce a dress code? Well, in simple terms, yes, they can, as long as it meets those other requirements I said. Must be proportionate and must not be discriminatory, and it must be reasonable and also accommodate any adjustments due to any health issues or other religious requirements. So as long as you are not unlawfully discriminated against, then your employer could ask you to wear a certain standard of dress or clothing to further the business image. So something to consider is the scope of that dress code. So the dress code should specify who it applies to, such as customer-facing members of staff, as opposed to people on a factory floor. There might even be a different dress code for managers or directors. The dress code should also identify the consequences of breaking those rules. For example, it might be as simple as I said earlier, ladies wearing dresses over a certain length. If it's too short, then that could be considered breaking the rules, and somebody will have to have words with that person to correct their behavior or the way they dress. Similarly with t-shirts with rude, offensive logos on them. Maybe you will allow staff to wear t-shirts, but not with any logos on them. Something that seems to be much more common nowadays is business casual as a look. And business casual seems to be the norm nowadays in most workplaces, and most dress codes reflect that as well in the way they're written. Typically, it will say something like chinos or trousers, no jeans. It might be polo shirts or shirts with collars, or express it in a certain way like that. For example, no trainers, it might be casual shoes. But this is all interlinked with the overall image of the company. So it has to be careful. The dress code cannot necessarily stipulate the quality of the clothes that are used, because that would be discriminatory against the individual if they couldn't afford a certain level of bespoke clothing, as an example. It might also account for accessories as well. So, for example, excessive jewelry might be an issue. It might also be precluding earrings or piercings if you're in a place where food is being handled, as an example. And it might require you to put plasters over them to ensure that they're not lost if they're not removed in the workplace. Also with accessories, it might be a case of identifying, for example, ties, company ties, or cravats for ladies if they don't want to wear a tie, things like that. are quite common even in this day and age to still see recorded as forms of dress code. So when it comes to dressing better than your boss, for example, one of the first things that I would consider is that there are other laws that protect an employee. So, for example, bullying in the workplace by your manager, your superior, or even other members of staff can be taken to court. So, for example, if people express the fact that you are dressed better than them, potentially, if they pursue it too much, too vigorously, could be considered as bullying or harassment, and could end up with them being in a lot of trouble. So it's one of those things that in a big workplace, most people would refrain from certainly telling their employees to dress down because they don't want to dress up to a certain level. And things are a lot more tolerated in large workforces. But in the smaller offices where it's the boss is one of only a few people in the office and they dictate the way they want their business to be run, then obviously they need to introduce a dress code. You can't tell people that they can't dress in a certain manner if you haven't got a dress code dictating how you want them to dress. So the first thing is a dress code. But if, for example, the dress code is so open, then there's no reason why you shouldn't dress in a certain manner, as long as it's not offensive in the way you dress. But it is something that you need to balance and measure yourself. So if you're constantly in an environment where people are not wearing ties, they're not wearing jackets, they might be wearing trainers and t-shirts and jeans, which is fine if that's the way they dress. But at the same time, if you choose not to dress that way, then maybe go up the next level. I wouldn't necessarily say wear a three-piece suit and tie if you're not in that type of environment. But certainly dress one notch up from jeans and t-shirts. So maybe wear a casual jacket, maybe wear a pair of shoes and a pair of chinos. Something along those lines would take it up just a little bit. And what I have found in my own workplace is that by regularly dressing in a certain manner, people become more and more tolerant to the way you dress, and you then start to escalate the way you dress step by step, a little bit here and there. Before you know it, people are not even interested in what you're wearing. They accept the way you dress and they're quite comfortable around you, even though you probably dress far more superiorly to them from a sartorial point of view. The problem is with the workforce, people that are your colleagues, when they start making comments, as I said before, potentially that could be considered as harassment or bullying, depending on how vigorous they pursue it. But generally, if there is no dress code in place, then they can't really make any comments on it that would be derogatory to you. At the end of the day, they choose to dress their way, you choose to dress your way. If they consider that you are dressing in a certain manner to get in with the boss or look at for promotional points of view, then they have the same right to dress up as you. And you can't account for their insecurities. So it's just a few things there really to talk about the dress code. I think the latter part is more interesting in the fact that you're always going to be in that quandary if you dress particularly well compared to others, but you shouldn't feel that you are being pressured to dress in a certain manner. If there is no dress code in place, no matter what you wear, you're going to be dressing particularly well and not in breach of any other requirements for wearing clothes in the workplace. So I'm interested in what you think. Let me know. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. We have a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, then please feel free to do so. We also love constructive comments, so if you'd like to make some, jot them down below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you've got a question you'd like to pose to us or you'd like an answer to, then why not jot it down? We'll try and answer your question for you. We also like ideas for future videos, so if you want to make a contribution and make a suggestion about future content, then please, again, jot it in the notes below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The next video could be something that you've recommended or suggested. So until next time, take care.